All right, well, it is officially 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I think, our third webinar in our Elevate and Educate Partner Series. If I haven't met you yet, my name's Jamie Christensen, and I'm a program manager with the Tulsa Regional STEM Alliance. It's nice to make your virtual acquaintance. Just so everyone is aware, we are going to go ahead and record today's webinar, and then we'll be sharing that out on our website later, as well as sending you all an email link. It's now my distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker today. Dr. Martha Parrott is a professor of mathematics education and assistant dean for the College of Science and Health Professions at Northeastern State University in Broken Arrow. She is a former classroom teacher who today prepares future teachers for their own classrooms and supports the continuing professional learning of those already in the profession. Dr. Parrott is passionate about the connection between a student's mindset and achievement and presents frequently on ways to strengthen our mindset in all that we do. I'm going to kick it on over to Dr. Parrott.
Thank you all for being here today, but most importantly, thank you for being individuals who are passionate about learning and innovating. And thank you in advance for your engagement in this conversation today. It is what you say and the things that you share that will take these ideas and hopefully make them relevant to what we do. I'd like to thank Tulsa Regional STEM Alliance for giving me the opportunity to facilitate a conversation with all of us today about some really important ideas. I also want to thank Aaron Parrott for his contributions to the content today. He is a soon-to-be senior cell and molecular biology major, and through the last few months and recent years, we've had a lot of mindset conversations, and it has really helped me to embrace this theory more deeply and to think about sometimes ways in which these ideas are distorted and misunderstood. I want to begin by bringing attention to why this conversation is so important. Our beliefs inform our actions. And that's why conversations like these are so important in the presence of a pandemic, in the presence of our workplace or our classrooms or our home and family. The things we do, the actions we take are informed by the beliefs that we cultivate, support, and nurture. And it's so important to strengthen our beliefs as early as we can, because research shows that once beliefs are in place, they're really difficult to change. And so with that, I'd like us to go ahead and begin quickly using a variety of different engagement opportunities today. Let's go to the chat box, and I'd love for you to share in the chat box your primary role for being a part of the conversation today. Are you here because you're a parent encouraging learning in your home? Are you a future teacher? Are you a classroom teacher? All of you are leaders. Are you a corporate partner? Let's head to the chat box and begin to see who is with us today. Wow, we have such an amazing group. I'm so excited. So I'm looking at that chat box, and can you see that, Jamie?
Absolutely, yeah. It looks like we've got a number of formal educators, K-12, a couple of coaches, a math coordinator. I love everyone's talking about where they teach. They've got some school pride. I see just a lot of educators on today's webinar.
And most of us wear more than one hat. So maybe we're here as parents as well as educators, again, all here as leaders. So thank you for helping us get acquainted with you and building a professional learning community even in a very short amount of time today. My screen has frozen. Let's see.
Technical glitches happen all the time, right?
I know it. Yeah, we've only practiced this several times for sure. I'd like to begin by giving you an overview of what we hope to incorporate in our conversation today. We certainly want to try to develop a deeper understanding of what growth mindset looks like. And because so many of us are teachers, future teachers, teacher leaders, parents, I hope that you will leave this short conversation today with some specific tools that either can translate into tasks we can do with those who we are serving, or perhaps conversation prompts that can be used to encourage mindset, productive mindset in those that we serve and are dear to our hearts and to our profession. Something else that's really important to me personally is making sure that as a part of our conclusion today, we look at very quickly ways in which some of these ideas have over time become distorted or misunderstood, so that we can make sure that as we try to cultivate a productive mindset within ourselves and our students and our families, that we're doing that in a very strategic and mindful way. So the next thing we're going to do is take our group of approximately 40 individuals, and we're going to break up into small breakout rooms. And you'll be in a breakout room for about 4 minutes approximately. I'll try to pop in and out of some of those breakout rooms, but there will be more due to our large size than I might be able to visit briefly during this breakout room session. I certainly not only hope that you'll quickly make some connections with someone you may not know, because we're going to randomize the groups that you are in, but I hope that you'll find it a comfortable space to answer the following question. Once again, we're freezing. Let's see what we can do here. No, we'll just go about this in another way. Just start over and see if we can. So many of us have had new upgrades to our Zoom software over the last week, actually. And those new upgrades are for security purposes. So let's give it a go again. Here we go. So when I put you in a breakout room, what I'd like you to do is to think about a time when you struggled to learn something. You were trying to get better at something, but over time you actually did become better at whatever that original task might have been, or whatever it was that you were originally trying to learn. So I want you to reflect again very quickly as you're in small groups about something you struggled with that you became better at over time. And what I'd like you to do is to also reflect on what caused you to get a little bit better. So this will be just a very short breakout opportunity. And now that functionality has disappeared from my screen as well.
No.
Let's just be flexible and do this in a different way. Instead of using that breakout room idea, is there someone who would share something that you tried to learn, get better at, and you remember struggling with it over time? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can,
Laura.
yes.
Initially, as an educator, I struggled with feeling comfortable with parent conversations, and part of what helped improve that skill was just stepping in and experience and trying over and over, and then tapping into my own experience as a parent and thinking about what I would want from my kid's teacher. That helped.
Excellent comment. So you partnered the struggle with some action steps, with some reflection. That's powerful. Can somebody else share something that you tried to get better at and you just remember struggling?
So
Okay.
one of the things that I struggled with was questioning techniques about leading those math talks and not always answering the question. And I actually tried it in reading and tried it in math, and where it clicked for me was in science. And then once I could do it in science, mostly because a lot of the times I couldn't answer the question. And so once I got comfortable with, it's okay if I don't know the answer, we'll all figure it out together. And the kids were more than willing to try harder once they found out not only is she not going to give us the answer, she can't. And I got better at disguising the fact that I couldn't, which I also got better at being able to give the answer. But I didn't, because I realized how much they had learned and how far they had come. And then it was easy then to translate that into math. And I just kind of went, I don't know. What do you think? And turning that around on them and getting better at those questioning techniques definitely facilitated much more growth in them.
That's awesome. There were so many rich things in what you said. And one of my favorite takeaways in your share is you talked about how the culture you were creating caused students to want to try harder. I think about when I was first trying to learn how to play the trombone and I didn't have a lot of lessons. Maybe you are someone who has tried to learn how to golf or to play tennis or basketball, play the piano. Sometimes we struggle and we give up, and we don't continue to move forward that, and then sometimes we become better. And so as you think about your personal circumstance, something maybe that you struggled with, or maybe you've observed your child or a student struggle with something new, typically one of these two dispositions characterizes whether we continue to get better at whatever that struggle might have been early associated with, or if we just stop and shut down. A fixed mindset is someone who might say, I'm either good at this or I'm not. And if I'm not good at it, I can't get better at it. This conversation today is applicable to all learning areas, but I spend a lot of time teaching mathematics and seeing a lot of fixed mindset when it comes to mathematics. And there's a great American myth that's trapped in this fixed mindset idea where you're either good at math, you're either good at science, you're either good at reading, or you're not. And if you're not good at it, you can't do anything about it. And we get trapped. We as a culture get trapped in that mindset and don't allow ourselves to move forward because we don't oftentimes embrace that growth mindset idea. I'd like to share that the ideas in this conversation today are research informed. If you can look at the book in the upper left-hand corner, this is the book that really began a lot of conversations about growth and fixed mindset a few years ago. It's written by Dr. Carol Dweck out of Stanford University. And when she began to put down on paper these research-informed ideas, her first target audiences was business industry, and then slowly it became very much connected to teaching and learning. In the bottom left-hand corner, you see one of Dr. Dweck's colleagues at Stanford, Jo Boaler, and she and Dr. Boaler and Dr. Dweck together have done a lot to try to advance these ideas about growth and fixed mindset. So fixed mindset is the idea that intelligence is fixed and you can't change it, and growth mindset is the idea that you can grow your intelligence through effort. And what I'd like us to do next is think about what can happen. I'm sorry, I'm just having all kinds of trouble with my screen. Again, even though a perfect run through a little while ago, I'd like to share, if you're becoming familiar with these ideas perhaps today and just beginning to know more about them, there's just incredible potential for the positive impact that mindset can have on anything that we're trying to learn or get better at. And so I'd like to show a 3-minute video that happens to be connected to mathematics, but again, today's conversation is about this process, these ideas, and how they are transferable to anything that we want to learn. Here you see Joe Bowler and students from a variety of grade levels.
Some people think I'm not good at math. I can never do anything. I'm not good at it. I'm just gonna give up.
A lot of people think of it as like prison, like you don't have any freedom.
Okay, time to go to your notebook. Okay, read chapter 1. Okay, here's your worksheet.
The math textbook, it's kind of like the Bible. You have to kind of worship the textbook, and I don't really like that.
Everyone's going so quickly, and I thought if I didn't go quick, people think I'm like not smart.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I got really sad about it.
You make a mistake, you're pretty much done. Yeah.
I can't do it fast, and they're so smart because they can, and I'm not smart, and I just kind of stopped.
You feel like you're serving a sentence for like nothing.
I love it. That does look like a cuboid.
I've done better with math when I was talking with people, sharing ideas.
4 or 5 brains work better than one. I'll see it one way, but then someone else will see it another way, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
I love that we're getting different answers out, because lots of problems in math, there are different answers.
Have more than one way to solve the question.
Because in real life, you're not gonna just do one thing. You're gonna do many things. You're gonna need to use different methods.
Yay!
No, hold on. Take your time and just experiment with every way that could possibly.
Some people think I'm not good at math.
Tell me your thoughts about what you just saw.
Yeah, anyone is welcome to hop in the chat and add your comments, or feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll share what I thought was great in that video. A student said, I've done better with math when I was talking to people, sharing ideas.
I teach 7th and 8th grade math, and everything they were saying about feeling like a prison and not being able to feel smart because they couldn't go as fast as the others. I see it every day in class, and I really like working with students trying to work on their growth math mindset because they need to bust out of that bubble. So we do at Tulsa Met Junior High, where I teach, we do a lot of hands-on things, like they were showing through YouCubed. So it really does work. It's just making more time to do it that way. So I love that she explained that there's many different directions to get to one answer. So explore all of them and find your way to get there. So.
Awesome. Great comments, great observations. What I love about the things you all are sharing are the rich details that you're picking up from this as a process. And that's something I want to tie back to in just a little bit. What we're doing right now in this conversation is building our foundation, comparing what a fixed mindset looks like versus a growth mindset. I appreciate how Jamie mentioned in the kind introduction this idea that it's not opinion that mindset impacts achievement. It is well documented through research. And at the very end of this short little clip, we see just a little bit of evidence in that particular example there. So the next thing I'd like us to do is we continue to build this foundation for what it can look like, why it's important, and that it's not just another fad. It's really important to me today to convey that growth mindset is not just about being open-minded. It's not just about being a positive, happy kind of person. There's so much more to it. And that's what I love about this short little clip. We see that positive mindset, but we see so much else happening at the same time. And again, these things that are occurring, these processes that are occurring in these clips would be as applicable to reading and science or learning the piano, just as any particular content area. Let's get engaged and keep ourselves moving forward. When you signed up for the webinar, you were encouraged to have handy a piece of paper and something to write with. And so what I'd like you to do, and we're going to abbreviate this task. It would take a little longer if you were doing it with students or your children. But what I'd like us to do is begin by taking that blank sheet of paper and putting an oval in the center of it. And I'll pause for a minute to give you time to do that. And then what I ask adults or students alike or children to do is to think about a time when they were trying to learn something new and they were struggling and they were frustrated. I hear so many adults talk about how they felt looked down upon by some of their teachers when they couldn't learn math well. They felt ridiculed and criticized by other students as well. And those frustrations begin to build up within us. And so what I'd like us to do is take those frustrations out on this beautiful white piece of paper. And sometimes if I'm in a classroom with a group of students, we could potentially stand in a circle. I want you to wad the paper up. And as you're wadding it up, you're, again, letting all that frustration out. And the next thing I would want you to do is to throw the paper across the room. Throw it across the classroom. If you do this in a classroom, you need to ensure that you are having students put their initials or name on the paper in some place, but they have their name on their paper, they've thrown it against the wall, they've thrown it across safely the room. You can find ways to do this without having students chunk things at each other and create a safety concern. But the takeaway is that after you've wadded it up, you want to spread it out. And then the next thing I'd ask you to do, or I'd ask students to do, is to write the phrase, my brain, inside that center loop. And then I've taken a Sharpie, and I would encourage you to do the same while we chat. With your Sharpie or pen or pencil, start to trace out all of the webbing that begins to present because of the crumpled paper, having wadded it up and now spreading it out. You're trying to create a tangible artifact that helps students begin to understand how growth mindset can impact them positively. So the second phase of the task then is to smooth it out, write my brain in the center, and begin to trace out all of these markings. And after that happens, students are going to begin to have a page that looks kind of like this. This is not my favorite image because it doesn't have the oval with the phrase "my brain" written inside of it. But that would be the modification I would make to this particular image. And the idea is that you have students keep this at their desk or in their classroom locker, or maybe on the bathroom mirror at your home, or on the refrigerator, wherever you feel like it would best be a reminder to students of what this message really is all about. What we know is that when we make mistakes, and when we persevere through those mistakes, a synapsis fires in our brain. And that synapsis creates and touches yet another. What we know is that we grow stronger connections in our brain when we work hard, when we make mistakes and persevere through, when we stick to the process. When we learn a new idea, and again, it's often because of mistakes, those currents are firing in our brain and connecting different areas of the brain. In other words, we want students, our children, adults to realize that this is what we want happening in our brain. And we're trying to begin to retool how students feel about mistakes. We're trying to encourage students to realize that when they make mistakes, if they persevere, if they stick with it, their brain gets stronger. So as we think about 5 tools from this short conversation today, this illustration is connected in my mind to 2 really important tools that help us build this growth, productive mindset foundation for anything we're trying to learn, to get better at, to improve. So tool number 1 that can be evidenced by this particular task: we must convince those we serve. We must first convince ourselves that our brains can grow, that our math destiny, that my reading destiny, my pianist destiny, it's in my control. It hasn't been determined for me by someone else. I think so often talking with parents, someone mentioned parent conferences a little while ago. How many times have we as teachers heard parents say to us, well, I was never good at math. I was never good at reading. I was never good at science. I was never good at artistry. As though that becomes the explanation for why their child may be struggling as well. So our destiny is within our control. You know, that's a great American myth. And other high-performing academic nations don't buy into that idea that you're either good at something or you're not. And if you aren't good at it, you can't get better at it. We want to turn those misunderstandings as well. turn them around. We know that students' beliefs about their intelligence, about their learning, it impacts their motivation, it impacts academic behaviors, it impacts how they respond to challenges. It ultimately impacts their academic achievement. Jessica Abulela, I know you're out there today. Can you read, so we can hear someone else's voice besides mine, can you read this striking comment that really resonates with me, and perhaps it will with others who are listening in today?
Sure. It says, one of the most powerful moves a teacher or parent can make is in changing the message they give about mistakes and wrong answers. When we teach students that mistakes are positive, it has an incredibly liberating effect on them.
We live in a culture, unfortunately, that sometimes doesn't really allow for mistakes. They're labeled as bad and negative. And if we can start retooling how we move forward from mistakes and realize that we can become better because of mistakes, as long as we persevere, as long as we have some good tools, some new strategies, some ways of rethinking things, those mistakes can become very powerful. I wonder if, again, you recall a moment ago in that short little clip, those students had powerful views of the impact of mistakes on their learning and their achievement. Let's go back to the chat box as we get ready to think about tool number 2 of 5 very quickly today. I'd like us to think about famous failures. Einstein has said anyone who's never made a mistake has never tried something new. So what I'd like you to do is to go to the chat box and share with us the name of someone. It could be someone famous, someone not so famous that maybe we might not even know about. Give us the name of a famous failure. And can you, as you're naming that person, begin to reflect on how that person persisted in the midst of setbacks? Kristen Tanner, can you watch the chat box for us and see what some of the prominent names are that are coming up? Oh, cool.
We've got Thomas Edison and Charles Schultz and Dave Ramsey, Michael Jordan, Donald Trump, Abraham Lincoln, another Michael Jordan.
Yay.
Michael Jordan didn't make the basketball team.
I love that. I was just thinking about that because of the documentary that came out, and I think it's so applicable for students to think about how, you know, generally we think that people are born with this innate ability, that they're just talented, but people like Michael Jordan are so successful because he practiced and practiced and didn't give up. So I love that example.
That's that perseverance at play. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to your point, Jamie, he didn't just say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. That isn't all that made him get to where he became. Very nice. What else, Kristen Tanner, do you see?
We've got Dave Pilkey. He's a children's author and artist. Oprah, the Wright brothers, Tiger Woods, Walt Disney, Michelle Obama, Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, what a great collection. The second tool I'd like to suggest builds off of this famous failure conversation. And honestly, if you went to Google and put in famous failures, within an instant, you would come up with a variety of names, some of which might surprise you and some which might be very understandable. But tool number 2 is a tool that helps cultivate more powerful beliefs about mistakes. So when we wadded up the paper, threw it across the room, we began to learn that that's what we want our brain to look like. We want those synapses firing. And the first takeaway from that is that Our destiny's in our control. We can do things to make things better. And tool number 2, part of how we begin to make things better from a mindset perspective, from an achievement perspective, is how we view mistakes. I'd like to share this image, which was given to me by a teacher in the Claremore School District. It's all about reframing our thoughts about failure. And at the beginning of the year, she puts just the framework of a tree on a wall in her classroom. And week by week, they add the picture of a famous failure who went on to succeed in spite of and perhaps because of the mistakes that were made. So a second task that could be modified in a variety of ways could be conversation oriented, bulletin board, wall representation, or just informal conversations around the dinner table. And it's not just that they became famous for first failing and later achieved that makes those conversations rich. It's about what happened as a part of that journey that moved them from the failure to more successful outcomes. Jen Helmer, I noticed you're in the webinar today, and it's nice to reconnect with you. Can you hear me, Jen?
I can.
Jen, I wondered if you might be willing to read the paragraph at the top of the slide so we can hear someone else's voice. It's a pretty powerful view about mistakes.
All right, it says, what separates the more successful people from the less successful people is not the number of their successes, but the number of mistakes they make, with the more successful people making more mistakes.
Wow. That should be an encouraging, rich piece of evidence that can help cultivate these conversations about famous failures and see how they use those mistakes to become even more efficacious. Erin Parrott, can you unmute and read a little anecdote about Einstein, please?
Okay, Einstein, probably the most well-known of those thought to be a genius, did not learn to read until he was 9 and spoke often about his achievements coming from the number of mistakes he had made and the persistence he had shown. He tried hard, and when he made mistakes, he tried harder.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Jen. The language that's in purple on these slides, it's language I try to model in my own life. It's language I try to model and use when I'm in classrooms with students. And, you know, people can figure out if we don't believe what we say. And that's why all of these ideas first have to be something we're deeply passionate about, that we deeply believe, and then in turn, we can model that for others. I love the idea that Einstein has thought many times he tried hard, and when he made mistakes, he tried even harder. In the interest of giving us some very specific, tangible takeaways, let us think about what you might do one-on-one with your child at home in a home teaching environment, or perhaps in a classroom with one student. And certainly these ideas can be transferable to larger groups as well, but these are some conversation prompts that can be used with a student who's just made a mistake, as we try to remind the student that mistakes are inevitable, but they can help us grow, they can help us improve. And that's why tool number 2 is so powerful. Not only can my brain grow, but tool number 2, how I respond to mistakes, either helps me move forward or turns me around and towards a setback. Take a quick glance, would you all, friends, at some of these statements in varied colors. And Molly Gabbert, Holly Rhodes, thank you for being with us today. In just a moment, would you maybe share a question that really resonates with you that you've used or that you're thinking about using with a student who made a mistake? Or maybe you can share something that is not even in this short list that might even be more powerful. And Molly or Holly, either of you, feel free to jump in when you have a moment to reflect.
I am reminded of a situation with a student in the NSU math clinic. The question, what did you learn from making this mistake? I asked that question to them in some form after working with, one of the first weeks we were working with decimal place value. That was something that we spent about 6 weeks working on. And after I asked that question, he was able to make a connection about decimal place value as it relates to whole number place value.
Cool. So I'm hearing you say, Molly, that you used a strategically planned question prompt. And I didn't know that when I asked you to jump in here. So that's exciting to hear, even though we were in the clinic together. So bravo, how exciting. But you used an intentional question prompt, which is what this slide is about. Flying by the seat of our pants may not always get us where we need to be, but being intentional about what we might say in the presence of those mistakes. You used it to bring connections between what a student knew and what a student did not know. Holly, do you have anything to add here?
What I think of when I look at this is reminded when you start asking students about their mistakes, especially in mathematics, at first they begin erasing quickly and out of fear. But after time, they begin to talk through it that I don't even have to speak. It just takes a couple of times you ask, so tell me how you arrived at this, and just your presence will become a prompt for them, and they will talk through it and find their own mistake and tell you what they did wrong, and the fear is gone, and it just becomes part of the normal process for them.
What I really love about your sharing of ideas, Holly, is that underneath everything you've talked about, you have created this safe culture where students can admit to mistakes. I know, Holly, that when you ask your students questions like why, how, they know that you ask those questions both within a presence where students are getting right answers as well as when they're getting wrong answers. All of this craters, all of it craters, if we only ask those kinds of questions to set up a student and pinpoint something they're doing incorrectly and outside a culture of support. So you have built this culture of support that makes those kinds of questions become powerful versus punitive. And I think that's a really important piece as well. Thank you, both Molly and Holly, for sharing those ideas. I'd like us to engage in a very short task. I'm going to put up a poll, and we're going to use this to lead us quickly to the third tool of 5 that I'd like to share today. And so I'm going to launch the poll, and as I do, what I'd like you to do is think about statements that you have said or that you've heard others said, and begin to sort the examples given as either examples of fixed mindset statements or growth mindset statements. Can somebody give me a thumbs up if you're able to see the poll on your side? Okay, all right. So read each statement. I give up as the first one. Do you believe that it is a fixed or growth mindset example? There are 9 statements to read quickly and share your thinking.
Again, this would be another great place for that elevator music that I didn't have prepared. I could sing if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Looks like we've got about half of the people.
Yeah, that's great.
So far. That's great.
Thank you all for being so engaged today. As I said in my early comments, it is your contributions that are making this such a rich conversation today. Going to allow about 30 more seconds. I think most of us have had an opportunity to respond, and whether you're responding just in the privacy of your own thought or perhaps as a part of a larger group conversation, again, I thank you for the things that you have shared. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now, and let me share the results with you. And you can kind of see that there's a lot of consistency in terms of how you have responded. The third tool I'd like to share has a lot to do with reframing the way we talk, with reframing our conversations. How many of us have heard students say, "I give up"? We heard in the little video clip that so many times we equate speed with understanding and learning, and we know through research that that's just not the case. Item number 4, wouldn't it be amazing if we could convince our students to deeply believe that mistakes are tools that support our learning? I visit with a lot of teachers who talk about how they serve some students who feel like, well, a 70% is good enough, a C is good enough, this artwork that I've done is good enough, I can get my grade and move on. And that again can in many contexts indicate a fixed mindset. Surely each one of these statements could potentially be embedded into context that could potentially change how we respond. And that probably explains some of our differences in how we've responded today. But look at item number 9, success is failure turned inside out. That's really part of what we want to convey and to encourage others to think about. So the third tool of 5 has to do with things we can incorporate in our language. Let us change our dialogue. Let us help our students change our dialogue. Students will say things like, "I'm not good at this. This is too hard." Look at the statement that says, "I'm awesome at this." Sometimes that one throws us. We can't imagine why that could be an example of a fixed mindset statement. But when we're saying, "I'm awesome at this to the extent that I can't ever get better, there's nothing else for me to do to improve," perhaps that's shutting a door to potential future growth and development. Instead of thinking some of the statements that are on the left, we as leaders, coaches, parents, teachers, we can begin to be intentional about helping them reframe the way they think, even in their own mind or in the language that they're using themselves. If you're looking for a task that you could use with your children, with your students, and I use these tasks with adults, with middle school students, with young children as well, sometimes just tweaking the language that I use. I love to use a lot of pairing kinds of tasks or activities. And so what What could happen is that you could give every student in your group either a yellow index card or a blue index card. The students would get one of each. On the yellow index cards, you might have growth mindset statements, and on the blue index cards, fixed mindset statements. And very much like this bulletin board picture displays, you could encourage students to mingle throughout the room and find their partner. Find a fixed mindset statement that partners with a growth mindset statement that again emphasizes this opportunity to reframe our language and turn it around. It begins by how we think and talk about these ideas. The fourth tool that I'd like to share is perhaps one that you're familiar with. We must encourage parents, leaders, corporate partners, teachers, students, children to embrace the power of yet. I love this borrowed visual. In my classes at NSU, I begin on the first day of the semester by modeling this language. I encourage them. In fact, all of my students get a letter from me that's waiting for them when they walk into the classroom. And that letter, in part, encourages them to embrace the power of yet. Many of my students come in and they're afraid of geometry. They're afraid of measurement, algebraic thinking, for example. And I encourage them, instead of saying, I can't do this, I'm not good at it, to add the word yet, if not verbally, at least in their mind's eye. Perhaps you're already doing the same. Perhaps you already have a power of yet story that you hold on to. I have a power of yet story. I had a student who perhaps was one of the weakest students I've had in many, many years in a geometry and measurement course. And at the end of the second week, she came up she was in tears, and she said, Dr. Parrott, I've had teachers who liked me through the years and they just kept passing me on, giving me a good enough grade so I could make it to the next course, but I never was able to learn or understand the mathematics. And now here I am at the college level, and I have all of that baggage that I'm bringing with me to this course experience. I'm afraid. I don't know if I can do it, and I have to do well in this course to be able to pass her certification test, to earn the GPA, et cetera, that's required for her program and plan of study. And I just parked it, stopped. The two of us sat down at a table in a room by ourselves, and I began to encourage her with one tool at a time. Let me repeat, one tool at a time. And the first time we visited, I encouraged her to just change her way of thinking. And in that regard, I wanted her to start incorporating the word yet when she felt like she couldn't do something. So the semester went forward. I could start to see some growth. After grades were posted at the end of the semester, and she did not make the top grade in that class, she made an 80% on her own without any gift. And that is a B at our institution. She sent me a letter and she said, you will never know how impactful the language we used about the power of yet had on me this semester. She went on to say, it kept causing me to want to try harder. That's what the power of yet is all about. The last tool I'd like to share is about how important praise is. And we are all tender-hearted individuals because we're in professions where we serve others and we want to see others succeed. And sometimes we're thinking that giving person praise versus process praise is a way to really spur students on to accomplish more. Person praise is where we're telling a student how smart he or she might be. But process praise is where we're valuing how hard the student works, We're valuing their perseverance, the strategies they use, the way they bring focus to what they do. We know for a fact through research that person praise does not encourage productive growth mindset. We know that process praise does encourage productive growth mindset and then tied to achievement. I'm going to abbreviate a research study that Carol Dweck talks about, and I'm going to abbreviate it very briefly and hope that I don't disadvantage her research in any way. But the bottom line is there were 2 8th grade groups of students. One was considered an advanced gifted group, and the other was an academic track group of students not thinking of themselves as shining stars. The academic track group of students was not praised for being smart or being amazing. They were praised through process praise, but the gifted students received person praise. And what happened at the end of the study is that students who were praised for being smart, for that person praise, they got to a threshold where they were no longer willing to take on challenges for fear of no longer looking smart. But the students who were praised for their diligence, the way they keep on trying and use mistakes to help them uncover other misunderstandings and move forward, those students, can you believe it? They outperformed the gifted group. And again, a lot of that was attributed to the process praise. As we begin to wrap up, I mentioned I wanted to comment very quickly on how some of Dweck's work has been distorted. There are some mindset misconceptions. I already have productive mindset. I've always had it. Or some people think a growth mindset is just about praising and rewarding efforts. Here's one. Look at the one in blue. Just say you'll have a growth mindset and everything will work itself out. That one perhaps discourages me the most. We can't just rely on saying we have growth mindset. This is not just about being a cheerleader. It's more than being a cheerleader. It's more than just saying that we have growth mindset. In fact, if you look at the red statement at the bottom, these are all concerns Dweck herself has mentioned. She says perhaps one of the most damaging implications that have come out of distorted views of her work is that some educators are now blaming children's mindsets for their failure to learn. This is a great motivational tool. It is about beliefs, but it has to be understood and used properly. We must do more than just say the power of yet. We must do more than just praise and reward. We must do more than just say, you can do this. We have to partner all of that with meaningful work. Levi Patrick, former math director at the Oklahoma State Department of Education, is known for having said, if you want students to think deeply, you have to give them something worth thinking about. So partnering all of these ideas today with meaningful tasks, give honest, helpful feedback, be truthful to students, give them opportunities to revise their work and show their learning, give them advice on future learning strategies. That's how we take what's good and right about her work and turn that into something very powerful. As I close then, I'm trying to be very mindful of our end time today. I'd like to use this quote from Joe Bowler: the very best opportunities to learn come about when students believe in themselves. And for far too many students in schools, their learning is hampered by the messages they've received about their own potential. So today, what brings us all together is the idea that we're looking for ways to encourage growth and development in our students. And We want to send them powerful messages about their potential to learn. And my closing comment then is to realize and remind ourselves that this doesn't happen overnight. We will gravitate between a fixed and growth mindset continuum on a daily basis sometimes, and with certain things that we take on. But we must remember it's a journey. Let's stay on the journey and be patient with ourselves when we gravitate more towards a fixed mindset, reminding ourselves to turn that back around and to move it again forward in a growth mindset manner. Thank you all so much for your engagement. My contact information is at the bottom of the screen, and I will punt it back to Jamie. Jamie, again, thank you for having me today. Thank you all for your comments, your expressions, your encouragement, and for being a part of this. Thank you.
Absolutely. I am so grateful for you, Dr. Parrott. This was very, very educational. I appreciate your time. Just as a quick end, I put a survey link in the chat box, so please take just a couple minutes to give us your thoughts on this and maybe some suggestions for future webinar topics. We'd love for you to join us next week. We have Anissa Angier-Dunn, who currently serves as the STEM instructional facilitator, and Tammy Shaw, who serves as the professional development and learning specialist, both with Edmond Public Schools. They'll be sharing out some useful tips, strategies, and resources for virtual learning that they've done a little bit of research on and had a little practice implementing. So please join us next week, and don't forget to take that survey. We'll be sending out this video recording as well as the slide deck from today's presentation. So look forward to hopefully seeing you all next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Laura.
It was awesome.
To answer your question, Michelle, if you're still on, absolutely, I'll send out a link for registration and more details when I send the slide deck and the video out to everyone as well. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
You scored me. Once upon a time, a real long time ago, I was a hoe.
I think this is the slide that was being asked about.